This is St. Peter's Basilica. If you're Christian, you probably recognize it as the church in Vatican City. It is the largest church by interior measure in the world. But today we're not talking about religion per se, we're talking about what it took to build this basilica. This basilica started its construction in 1506 and it finished in 1626. To help you with the math there, it took 120 years to build this basilica. Why is that important? Because the people that started building this basilica did not get to see it finished. And that is what we are talking about today. It is a concept that is commonly referred to as cathedral thinking, because many cathedrals, like the St. Peter's Basilica, took many generations to build. Sometimes it wasn't even 1 or 2 generations, but 3 or 4 generations. Really imagine that. Imagine your ancestors building some structure that they would not see finished, that their children would not see finished, that perhaps their grandchildren would get to see finished. That is cathedral thinking. It is long-term thinking taken to its extreme. Why am I talking about this today? Because unfortunately, cathedral thinking is dying. What's up everyone, this is Brandon from Wealth Potion, and today we're going to be discussing what is cathedral thinking, why is it dying, why is it important, and what are some things we can do to cultivate cathedral thinking in our own lives? Even if that doesn't mean building an actual cathedral, how can we capture the essence of meaning and purpose and sacrifice towards some project that is not for our own self-interest, but for generations to come? So without further ado, let's dive in. So what is cathedral thinking? At a very basic level, it's dedicating your life to some purpose or idea or goal that will live beyond your own life. And to be clear, it does not have to be a cathedral per se. There are many structures in the past that took many, many generations to build, such as the Leaning Tower of Pisa, that took almost 200 years to build. The Great Pyramids, which modern historians say took 20 years, but likely took a lot longer than that. If you know, you know. The Great Wall of China is a huge example of this. Although it was stopped and started multiple times, it took over 2,300 years to complete. This does not apply only to physical structures. Of course, if we look at history, most of these works were physical structures because they didn't have as much technology and innovation as we do today. Some modern examples of cathedral thinking include space exploration. Look at what Elon Musk is doing with SpaceX and pursuing the idea of humanity becoming a multi-planetary species. That is something that Elon himself has admitted he will probably never see in his lifetime, but he is still pursuing that goal. There are many advances that are happening in biotechnology around treating cancer and gene editing and all these advanced biotechnologies that I'm not super familiar with, but these are all technologies that may take decades, if not centuries, to fully form and to fully benefit from. And yet many, many people are working on solving these exact problems. And as I mentioned before, I believe Bitcoin is another example of this. Not crypto, mind you, but Bitcoin, which is a form of money that cannot be printed by the government. Alas, those are just some examples of modern cathedral thinking, but it's not as important what those examples are, but the philosophy that underpins them. It is dedicating your life to a project or goal that you may not be able to fully see the fruits of. It is something that you are doing for future generations, whether you have children or not. And so that brings us to the next question, which is, why is it dying? While this is subjective, there are obviously not any studies out there or surveys that ask people about cathedral thinking. I think that there is ample evidence in 2024 to suggest that this long-term thinking is unfortunately dying. The most obvious example of this is social media. I mean, we are all addicted to screens, whether it's YouTube or TikTok or Instagram. Younger and younger generations are spending more time on screens, and that is making them more short-term oriented. I'd be very surprised if many young people are thinking about where they're going to be in 1 year, let alone 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 100 years. And by having more convenience in our lives, with the ability to order food from your phone and have it delivered to you, people are just unfortunately not planning for the future as much. And this takes me to the second and more depressing reason, which is that young people simply aren't having as many children. We're seeing birth rates decline all across the world. And I mean, if there is no next generation, then of course you're not going to care about the next generation as much. Now, of course, I'm not blaming young people for this, to clarify. One of the biggest reasons for young people not having children is they believe that they cannot afford children. And I've touched on this in other videos. I believe Bitcoin is one of the solutions to that, but I digress. The reality is birth rates are declining basically all across the world, with some very few exceptions such as Africa, the Middle East, and maybe some Eastern European countries. And then last but not least, again, I mentioned I'm not going to get too deep into religion here, but I do think that there is a correlation to materialism and a lack of meaning that we're seeing with younger generations. Because many more people are not religious nowadays, they do not have a purpose or service that is above themselves. We're seeing a rise in individuality, and not in the, freedom, American value sense, but really in a, quite frankly, a selfish sense, in that I can define my own purpose, that morality is relative, that, I'm a self-made man, a self-made woman. Like, this language was not as prevalent in our grandparents or great-grandparents' generation, because they had communities, religious or otherwise, that they were contributing to. And I think young people nowadays are much more aspiring to become self-made, which is wonderful in some ways, but also dangerous in many other ways. So those are the three big reasons why I believe cathedral thinking is dying: social media and technology, people having less children, and a lack of meaning, whether that's due to religion or otherwise. If you have other reasons, I'd love to hear from you. Why do you think people are much more short-term oriented nowadays? Leave a comment below. So next, I want to talk about why we should cultivate cathedral thinking. Because maybe you are one of those young people and you're thinking, well, you know what? I want to maximize my own life. Why should I care about future generations? And I think part of this is due to age and maturity, right? Like, I'm 30 years old. I'm certainly not suggesting that I'm some wise elder by any means, but I do at least have the self-awareness to recognize that as I get older, my needs are going to be less important, and my future children's needs are going to be much more important. Even within the personal finance space and finance content creators, there's this growing notion of YOLO, of using up all your wealth while you're alive. There's a very famous book that's growing in popularity in the finance space, which is Die with Zero. It is the concept of going to your grave with no money. And I think this is a very dangerous and very selfish mindset. So I recognize that so far my reasons for cultivating it have been pretty subjective. Let me give you a fully objective reason on why you should cultivate cathedral thinking. Because at the end of the day, cathedral thinking is just an extreme version of long-term thinking, and it is the opposite of short-term thinking. And if you look at the data, there are numerous scientific studies that suggest that people who practice delayed gratification, even as young as children, are more likely to be successful later in their lives. There's a very, very famous scientific test called the marshmallow test, where a scientist will give two children a marshmallow, and then the scientist will tell the children, I'm going to leave the room, and when I come back in 10 minutes, if you haven't eaten the marshmallow, I will give you a second marshmallow. And the study has shown that the children that did not eat the marshmallow and waited and got the second marshmallow, they went on to be much more successful later in life. It's intuitive. People that delay gratification, that don't go for the short-term pleasure, are more likely to have a much more fulfilling life because they're saving for the future, they're investing in the long term. And so there you have it. There's the objective reason, because as the science shows, the more long-term thinking oriented you are, the more successful you will be. And the subjective reason is that I believe it is our moral duty to serve the future generations. And this is not a moral relativism argument. I believe that this is something that is believed by most religions today. So this is not just me saying, oh, you have to listen to what Brandon says. And so last but not least, how do we cultivate more cathedral thinking? The first thing I would suggest, which is probably the most obvious, is limit your social media use. Social media has been shown time and time again to make us more short-term oriented. They have literally created a scrolling wheel mechanism that resembles a slot machine in a casino to get us hooked, to get us more oriented towards more and more content. And I don't know if you notice this or if this is just me, but if I've been scrolling on social media for a long time, like let's say I spend an hour on my phone, after I put my phone down, I physically feel like I'm in a brain fog. Like I am shorter tempered, that I'm not thinking ahead, Over time, if you imagine your body and your brain doing that day in, day out, of course you're going to be more short-term oriented overall. And so whatever that might be for you, I'm happy to do a deep dive video on it because I think this topic deserves attention. But there are many other great creators on this app that talk about this around how you can create a dumb phone, how you can limit your screen time, how you can at least tweak your apps so that you don't have as many notifications and distractions that are pulling you into these apps. At the end of the day, do something to reduce your screen time, especially on addictive social media apps. Secondly, I would suggest you have to find your purpose. And if you think reducing social media is difficult, I mean, this is very difficult. This may take your whole life, but the idea is that you are trying to find your purpose. You are angling yourself towards some long-term goal, even if you don't know what that is yet, even if you don't see St. Peter's Basilica in your imagination. The fact that you're trying to move closer and orient yourself towards a goal is a good sign, and it's going to force you to think more long-term. And for you, that may be religion, right? Religion does provide an answer to purpose and meaning in your life. But if you are agnostic, if you are a secular person, there are many other ways to find purpose. And what I would suggest is the best way to move closer to your purpose is through action, is through trying things, figuring out what you like. If you're passionate about climate change, go work for a climate change nonprofit and see if the science checks out. See if these nonprofits are actually helping move the world towards what you believe the world should look like. And maybe your life experience supports that and you move closer to your purpose, or maybe you realize, hey, this isn't what I made it out to be, and you find some other purpose. But what I'm trying to say is you're not going to get closer to your purpose just sitting in your room scrolling through social media. You're going to get closer to your purpose through action. And last but not least, I'll leave you with one that's a little bit more tangible, is write down your plans, write down your vision, write down a mission statement. And if this is too difficult, start with 1 year. Really just say, like, 1 year from now in 2025, or from whenever you're watching this video, where do I want to be? What do I want to do when I wake up? What sights do I want to see? What do I want to smell? Like, get really specific with it. Write down what your day in the life would be 1 year from now. And then if you feel comfortable with that, try 2 years, try 5 years, try 10 years. And by the way, I think a lot of people get scared of this exercise because they're like, oh, it might change. That's totally fine if it changes. If it changes, then redo it, tweak it. I will share personally that I have a note in my phone, just using the regular notes app, where I've written a personal statement for myself 10 years from now. And I edit it every other week or so. I tweak little things here and there. But again, as I tweak it, as I edit it, it's getting closer and closer to that long-term vision. And one day, I really do hope that I can move that out to a 20-year vision, or a 50-year vision, or a 100-year vision. Really, the takeaway here is start writing. Write things down and come back to it every day to tweak it. I should mention, not only do I tweak it every week or two, I try to read it every single day. And I'm not perfect, I forget some days, but I come back to it every day if I can to read my personal statement and make sure that it's aligned with what I believe and what I want for my life. This is already a long video. I find my videos are often longer than I intend. I will try to be more brief in the future, but at the end of the day, I want to make sure these videos resonate with you, and sometimes I repeat myself, sometimes I emphasize different points multiple times, but this is all on purpose. There's all intent in why I'm doing this. So hopefully you've walked away understanding why cathedral thinking is important, that the very fact that it is dying is a bad thing that we should all be more aware of, and hopefully I've equipped you with some techniques that you can take into your life to cultivate long-term thinking and move closer to your version of St. Peter's Basilica. So thanks again for your time. If you like this video, leave me a like, subscribe to the channel. We'll be doing a lot more videos about topics like this. And of course, as always, I would love to hear your feedback. So please do leave a comment or send me an email, and I will see you next time. Thanks.